People are obviously going to have a good giggle about this, aren't they? And we all think we may or may not know somebody who shows this behaviour. So let's have a look then at what you mean by a psychopath. So what are the characteristics that you're talking about when you say, you know, there are good bits of psychopathic behaviour?
Well, it's true, isn't it, Kate? When most people hear the word psychopath, they instantly think of Hannibal Lecter. But actually, when psychologists like myself talk about psychopaths, we're in fact referring to a distinct subset of personalities with a specific group of characteristics, such as ruthlessness, fearlessness, mental toughness, coolness under pressure, self-confidence, emotional detachment, focus, charm, charisma, and reduced empathy and conscience. So just the kind of personalities.
Is it being psychopathic that gives those qualities? Because those feel like qualities that could be found in all sorts of people.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, and it really depends on the context that you're in and why you use those characteristics. And you've got to have quite a few of them in order to qualify as being high on the psychopathic spectrum, as we call it, or a psychopath.
So where, Kevin, does the line get drawn from these personality traits being an asset to actually being destructive and being... I mean, because you say we think about Hannibal Lecter, the front of your book, you've actually got the picture of I don't know what the sort of a Greek philosopher, I assume that is, with the Hannibal Lecter mask. Yeah. When do you step over the line, and when do these traits stop being sort of positive traits and then start sort of emerging into the negative?
That's right. Well, I think if you imagine those traits that I've just outlined as being the dials on a studio mixing desk that you can turn up and down in various combinations, you arrive at two conclusions. The first is that there is no one definitive correct size fits all that those dials can be turned up at, but rather it will invariably depend on context and the particular set of circumstances that you might find yourself in.
So if you're a boss and you make a brutal decision to sack large numbers of people because you want to save the company for the good of all, that could be seen as a brutal kind of, you know, decision a lot of people couldn't do, but was positive. When does it become negative, I think is what
Well, if you're laying people off just for the sake of it, for instance, or to settle a grudge or something like that. So it's exactly the same behaviour that you're getting rid of someone, in a sense, but, you know, you can either do that for good reasons, for financial reasons, for the business, or, for instance, if you're what we might call a bad psychopath, you might do it for the wrong reasons, for, you know, for a power struggle or to just set, as I say, settle scores.
So you talk about sort of some well-known leaders in history as being psychopaths or not being psychopaths. I think you sort of... What about Hitler? I mean, that seems like a pretty open and shut case.
If we go back to those dials on the mixing desk, though, one of those dials is fearlessness. And actually, Hitler was not very high on fearless, so he could dish it out, but a lot of the times he wasn't that great under pressure. So that's why he might not have been as high as some people might have expected, but he was still very high on the psychopathic spectrum.
You also list, if you could argue it, his opposition, Winston Churchill.
I think if you look at, you know, politicians in general, it's not surprising that you find that a lot of them would be high on the psychopathic spectrum. They've got to make tough calls under pressure. They've got to be pretty narcissistic to run for office in the first place. You've got to stick the knife into people that you like, schmooze people you don't like. So all of those things are kind of psychopathic characteristics.
It seems like that those characteristics are so prevalent and so important, it seems like within the world of sport, actually, there are sportsmen and sports teams need some of those traits in order to perform. You know, we've got Liverpool in the Champions League final, World Cup's about to come up. Would you say it would be quite handy if the England team's got a few psychopaths in? Absolutely right.
I mean, if you want a kind of person that's going to slot the ball into the bottom right-hand corner safely and coolly, you're going to pick a psychopath, somebody that's very focused, somebody that takes the emotion out of the situation, someone that avoids being distracted, and someone that's cool under pressure. So if I was going to pick someone to put England through the World Cup final against, you know, say Germany or Brazil in a penalty shootout, I'd be looking at someone very high on the psychopathic spectrum.
So do you think sometimes then the manager doesn't need to look necessarily at their skill, but actually look at their character traits and say, do you know what, he is a really fantastic footballer and I think he could score a great penalty, but actually he's a bit too susceptible under pressure. I'm going to go with the psycho.
Absolutely right, yeah. And you've got to have the skill set, but you've also got to have the personality to enable you to optimally operationalise that skill set. So very important.
Anyone out there who's watching who might be having to work with a psychopath, for example, you know, maybe they've got someone at their work that demonstrates these characteristics. What do you think the best way of dealing with that is?
Well, my advice is to always if you feel that you're working with a psychopath, the main thing to do is to get them on your side. So if psychopaths feel that their own fate is tied up with the fate of the group or the people that they're working with, sometimes they can be even better team players than people who aren't psychopaths. So if you can put it in their self-interest,
Isn't it in itself, though, displaying somewhat psychopathic behaviour? Because you're not calling the person on their poor behaviour, you're making the best of it for yourself.
Absolutely right, yeah. So it's all about, you know, if you've got a psychopath in the workplace or you think you've got one, make sure that they're on your side and working with you rather than against you.
Good to know. Just asking for a friend.
Yeah, just asking for a friend. Yeah. I wonder if that's going to make a difference. Kevin, fascinating to speak to you this morning. Thank you very much for coming and sharing.
There's a lot of people at home this morning talking about that, aren't they? I'm wondering,
does it ring bells with the boss at work?
There's a psychopath in the team. Is there a psychopath in the studio? One or two, to be fair.